Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Happy to see you all. Folks having fun over there, feel free to join us over here. We're going to have a great session.
Lots of seats up here.
Lots of seats that need to be filled. So why should anyone sit here? What are we going to accomplish today is the real question. So this session is the Smart Buyer. The folks that I have here, and I'm going to let them do their own introductions because they are a very diverse group of folks that have great experience working with Vonage, our customers. The purpose of this session is to help you as you are out there talking, whether you're a partner, whether you're a customer, whether you're a Salesforce, right? Folks are evaluating new communication solutions and technologies. And quite frankly, sometimes folks don't really know what questions to ask until they've talked with 7, 8, 9, 10 providers. So the purpose of this session is for these folks to share their experiences. They're in front of customers all day long, hearing common challenges and goals and feature functionality requests. So we're going to try and shorten the amount of time that you have to spend learning what those questions are and learning what key goals you're trying to accomplish by changing your communications tools. And we're going to learn it all from these folks here. So I'll introduce myself first. There's a mic there. My name is Laura Colon. I lead our sales team in the West for Vonage. I've been here for 8 years. I've been in a number of different roles. So we've got a lot of experience dealing with customers who need new communications tools, whether it be unified communications, contact centers, APIs. So I'll give a little bit of color, but these are the true brains behind the operation. So Katrina, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Katrina Hall here. I'm a senior solutions architect with Vonage, specializing in both our contact center solutions and our unified communications. Been with Vonage for 7 years. I actually launched our first contact center product. I actually was a product manager before I joined our solutions architecture team. So bringing a lot of experience to the table from the enterprise space. So glad to be here. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm Oscar Rodriguez. I lead the Global Solutions Engineering team here at the Vonage API Group. And I've been with the company for about 7.5 years. I actually started on the application side through an acquisition of a product that used to be called gUnify. Now it's part of the greater integration platform. And I led the pre-sales team in the US for the API group. And then now I've transitioned over to the solutions engineering group.
Hi everyone, I'm Karim. I'm part of the solution engineering team or custom engineering team. So my role is really to help our customers and partners drive cloud contact centers services adoption with a focus on CRM and AI integration. Really excited to be here today.
And Joe?
Yeah, so Joe Schofield, Senior Solution Architect for Vonage as well. Joined the company about 2 years ago from a customer. So previously I was an IS application manager in charge of the Salesforce ecosystem. I've been working as a Salesforce administrator or manager for since 2012 is when I got certified. So been in the ecosystem for a very long time. Have a very deep understanding of evaluation, implementation, long-term care and feeding of telco as it relates to the Salesforce ecosystem.
Thank you. So as you can see, we've got a diverse group of folks with great experience with our technologies, whether it be from a product perspective, from a customer perspective. So let's start off with the top goals that we're hearing from our customers. Karim, why don't you share some of the goals that you're hearing out there in the field?
I mean, we always hear about customer success. I think for me in the last few years, we've seen really a switch where all customers are really looking to improve the user experience and providing the right tools. I've seen so many customers with their agent having to switch between 5, maybe 6 applications to be able to serve, to answer a question. I think being able to bring that together from a technology perspective and to simplify it is a huge value, and we see a lot of investment around it. And Service Cloud Voice is a great example. So bringing the voice channel into Salesforce Omnichannel widget to really simplify the agent experience, but also to improve it with tools like real-time transcription and also next best action. So it's not only about providing the right tool, it's also about assisting the agent to answer quicker and better.
Totally. I mean, the reality is there's so many different applications that we're seeing customers use today. And so for their agents, it can be overwhelming to have to use Slack and Salesforce and Vonage and other providers. So we try and make it very simple for the customers. Oscar, why don't you share some of the top goals you're hearing in the field?
Yeah, so I would say keeping in the same topic of contact center, we have customers that come to us that want to keep up with the latest capabilities in their contact center without necessarily replacing them, right? So with the augmentation of a contact center using API products such as voice, that can extend to some of those capabilities such as real-time transcription, even translation. That's one of the top things that customers come to us for. Also reducing the amount of calls that end up with a live agent is one of their top goals. That reduces the amount of staff that they need to have. So using some of these technologies such as our voice API and messaging APIs, along with our Studio AI that will enable those type of use cases.
Totally. Flexibility, scalability, global. The translation stuff is really cool, and people need it because you can't always get a lot of folks speaking a specific language, so being able to translate and do more with less is important. Joe, I think you've got a ton of experience being that you come from the customer side. Why don't you share some of the top goals that you hear from leaders?
One of the biggest pieces that we're hearing right now is data is the lifeblood of an organization. And a lot of companies today have a proliferation of data. They have a lot of information that's out there, but it's not contextualized. They don't understand how it relates and how it's ultimately impacting their business. So one of the big things that we try to solve is how do we put all of that data in the same place? How do we contextualize it to allow those records to interact and really start to paint a better picture of what's driving success or failure within your own business or market?
Now, these are the things that organizations want to accomplish, but the reality is there's a lot of challenges and barriers that get in the way of accomplishing these goals that these folks are talking about. So Katrina, why don't you share some of the top challenges and barriers that you're hearing from customers today?
I'd say one of the number one things that we hear from our customers, I actually had a conversation a few minutes ago about this, is giving the supervisors or managers visibility into the day-to-day operations. Are your agents or your sales teams having the right conversations with your end users? Are they really saying what you think they're saying, so we can use our tools to capture that information? Another thing, going back to Karim, is talking about that user experience. You want to make your agents happy, and you want to give them the tools that they need to do their job, where they don't have to do a bunch of app switching and doing things in 10 different systems. So another thing that I've heard a lot is keep it as simple as possible, and then consolidate into a single source of truth if you can, to make that experience better for the managerial staff, your customers, as well as the agent experience.
Yeah, I think you raise really important points, and I think what's most relevant for everyone is with COVID, a lot of people had to go remote, and we really shortened the time frame. I mean, it was happening, right? People were starting to allow flexibility, people working from home, but managers don't have the visibility necessarily. Their technology doesn't enable them to manage remote workforces. And so with COVID, they were forced to figure it out. And so now that people are used to working from home, and let's be honest, the fear of COVID never really goes away. So how can they enable long-term strategies for remote work? And having the visibility is like so important. I remember, you know, I would be in an office sitting next to a salesperson who's making cold calls, and we don't have that anymore. So how do you get the tools that enable you to actually manage that team and visibility to drive those things? Is you're limited by your technology if you don't have the technology to do it. So Oscar, what about you? What challenges are you hearing out there?
Well, some of the challenges, you know, making sure that the vendor offers the right support throughout the buying process. Whether the customer is interested in a POC, having the right teams within the pre-sales team to support that, right? And that goes from, you know, having a knowledgeable sales rep, a knowledgeable solutions architect that can design the proper solution for the customer. And then, you know, a team like mine that actually gets deep into the implementation with, you know, being able to provide sample code, reference applications that will aid in that successful POC. So, you know, those are challenges that customers come to us when they are shopping around. A lot of times, other vendors focus on you know, just trying to fit something that doesn't necessarily fit, right, to what the customer is asking for, and let them off into a POC without necessarily supporting them, and you know, they end up wasting a lot of time, right? So having that right vendor that has a proper support system, and not only during the pre-sales phase in a POC, but you know, once you've decided on the vendor, somebody that's going to continue supporting you throughout the deployment process to get you from a POC into production, right? So keeping that almost like a white glove experience.
Totally. Customers don't always know, they don't know what they don't know, right? We do this all day long, so we know what some of the important features, functionality, things like that are. But when a customer is in an evaluation, until you start to talk to 4 or 5 different vendors, then you're like, oh, you know what, I have to ask that same question to all the other 4 people I met with before. It didn't come up till my 5th meeting. And so making sure that you have a knowledgeable team with the vendor that you're working with is really important on the front end to make sure that what you're trying to accomplish can be accomplished. And then post-sale, making sure that, okay, do they have the support to actually support it moving forward?
Yeah, and also I'd like to add that it's not just knowledge about the product itself, but product about the specific industry, the specific market. So, you know, maybe the customer doesn't know that you can't send SMS at a certain time in a certain country, right? And so having the right team that is able to guide customers with those type of things, having the right for example, we have a healthcare team that you know, is specialized in dealing with those type of customers. They know a lot of the industry lingo, the industry best practices. So you know, making sure that that's available for our customers is important.
Absolutely agreed. Karim, what are your thoughts on the challenges that you're hearing from customers today?
I think the main one I see is really the complexity of the technology, where they struggle and sometimes are overwhelmed. You know, when we talk about first contact center, there are so many components going not only from inbound call services, but now we're talking about outbound dialer, even predictive dialer, omni-channel, and then you have workforce management, quality management, all those terms and acronyms that are really hard to understand when you're not, you know, doing that day to day. So definitely difficult. I think that's also our job, to educate our customer and try to guide them to really answer what's their business goals. And the second one, which is related to the first one, is really having the right talents. You know, we talk a lot about AI, conversation AI, but they don't have the right team to understand how to build a journey to help and, you know, serve their customer in the right way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Joe, what do you want to add?
Change is expensive. It's expensive across the organization, from IT investment in infrastructure, technology, training, change management, all of those things add up. What the biggest problem that our customers are facing today is ensuring that when they're making a technology buying decision, they're investing with a company that's going to be able to scale and support them as they continue to grow and evolve as a company. Having the flexibility, the appropriate back-end technology that can be upgraded, changed, modified as the landscape, as the global economy, as the remote working, any of those things is continue to change through time, selecting the right technology vendor that can do that journey with them is their number one concern that they're trying to solve for. One of the things that we strive to do is build a technology stack that is scalable and extensible, reliable, but has the flexibility when we start adding the APIs, when we start adding custom engineering on this. We either have it pre-built or we have the capabilities to build it custom and grow with a company's needs.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. You think that everyone used to buy these on-premise phone systems, and then you're stuck with it for 10 years. It doesn't evolve, right? So working with a cloud provider who has a track record of continuing to evolve is really important, making sure you're future-proofing yourself. Businesses are evolving. The way businesses communicate is not the same as it used to be, and it's going to continue to evolve, and you have to have a partner who's going to evolve with your customers' needs as well.
And since I'm looking at the time, and we may have some extra time, so I want to keep with that, right? Because I think it's also important not just to evolve, because when I hear evolve, I kind of associate it to kind of keeping up, right? Keeping up with the other vendors, kind of evolving with them, right? But it's also important for a technology company or a vendor to innovate, right? To come up with things that are new, that differentiate, that will have something for the customer that other customers won't have, right? So making sure that innovation is in the company's DNA, and also providing not just one component, but also many aspects of your communications needs, right? So that you don't have to buy from one vendor, one communication component, and then have to source it from somebody else, right? So having a full breadth of communications capabilities, I think, is also.
I think that this is like a brilliant point, because you're right, innovation is critical in any industry. And everyone's got competitors, right? Don't you want to have a competitive edge? Well, having the best communications platforms, making sure that you're innovating and you're constantly evolving, but innovating quicker than your competition, you gotta have the right partner to do that. I love this point. I think that's so valid. Anything else anybody else would like to add to this? All right, cool. Well, I've got more questions. Features. Okay, so when we go into meet with customers, very commonly we'll say, what are your goals? And we start hearing all these features, right? Goals are very different than features, but features are important because features help you accomplish your goals. So what are the most common features people are asking us for, Katrina?
So one of the things we see all the time, it goes back into that, what I had mentioned on the last question with visibility. So customers want to have more insights into the conversations that are happening between their employees and their customers. And then are your customers actually saying or asking for the things that you think they are? So one of the great things that we have as part of our contact center solution is our Conversation Analyzer product. So we're able to transcribe that conversation, pick out keywords, and then use that information to help supervisors make better decisions about staffing issues. They could also use it as upsell opportunities, so it's a great sales tool where you start to see close rates because your salesperson mentioned this particular keyword, and now you're able to go back and look through those phone calls and find out when they were talking about that. You also, using Conversation Analyzer is a great tool to really highlight and find those champions within the organization, those rock stars, and then you can share that information with your other team members to help bring them up to speed. So then you have a whole group of rock stars, just not one individual person. The other thing about our Conversation Analyzer product, I would say, is with the Great Resignation, agents' time, it's so valuable. You don't have a lot of resources. And there's a lot of turnover in contact centers, to be honest. That happens all the time. So with using Conversation Analyzer, you can also have that as a tool to help you ramp up your team faster, because you can have scripts and then you're like, well, they're not sticking to the way that the conversation should go. And supervisors don't have to sit and listen to thousands of phone calls. They can just easily look at the Conversation Analyzer, see are they saying the key words, and they can use that also as like a grading tool to save them time as well. So.
Yeah, I think the way that you're framing it is important because, again, everyone wants transcription and everyone wants conversation analytics, but why? And there's so many great outcomes that come with implementing these types of features. Joe, what are you hearing about features that people want?
I think it really depends on what side of the company you're dealing with. From a sales perspective, almost every call center sales team that we talk to immediately says, I want a predictive dialer. And we immediately have to claw that back and unpack that and understand, okay, what do you mean by predictive? All right, so predictive dialing is I'm going to call 10 phone numbers. If I get somebody to pick up, I'm then going to connect an agent. Right? When you say that to most customers, they're like, that's not what I'm doing. What they're actually talking about is a progressive dialer that allows them to automate the process on a cadence that drives effectiveness and efficiency of an outbound motion in an automated fashion. So clarifying what customers mean is vitally important when you're doing some of these evaluations. With our product, we have that kind of cadence capability, but it's fully baked into Salesforce. So we go one step beyond that. We're not leveraging an API to do a data scrape and pull information into our back end, run it through an algorithm, then create your outbound dialing list. We're doing that directly in Salesforce itself. Why is that important? Well, one of the major goals for most of our customers is improving their speed to lead metrics if they get an interaction on a web form or something like that. Well, if your API call is only calling every 5 minutes, and you are trying to get to a speed to lead of 3 minutes, and that lead hit right after your last call, there's no way you can get to 3 minutes on that call. You're at 5 minutes before it's even into the system. So our methodology, by embedding it directly inside of Salesforce, ensures that as soon as Salesforce knows about that piece of information, it's going to recalculate those outbound dialing lists and allow our customers to actually achieve that goal of reducing the time it takes to make that initial outbound outreach.
You made a point that I want to expand and emphasize. A lot of the time when customers are doing evaluations, they are, let's say, the point person for their organization doing this project. There are so many groups in the organization: sales, service, collections, accounts receivable, whatever the group is for each organization. It's so important to ask, what features do you want, but then why? And what are you trying to accomplish with those features? You know, so often we'll work with an individual in an organization and then we find out requirements come up later and we kind of have to go back to the drawing board. So making sure that on the front end, when you're getting ready to meet with a provider, you're asking stakeholders in the organization that are affected by the change what they want in the new system. And then, hey, pull them into the conversation. Any provider that you're working with is happy to do demos to show you how those specific use cases are accomplished with that technology. So I think that's important. Karim, I forgot my question. Oh, features.
I think, we're in 2022 and we still have customers struggling with the omni-channel approach. They're still doing a multi-channel approach, meaning that they select best of breed, but they don't put things together to provide a true omni-channel from a customer perspective. So being able to have, within a queue, having email, chat, calls, and prioritizing one channel over the other. We always think of the voice being the channel that should be priority one, but if you have like a CEO, a CDO, actually initiating a chat, or like a very large customer, like that can impact your revenue, sending an email, you want to be able to prioritize that channel over voice call. I think that's the one I see like still customers struggling with, and they really want to solve this one first before bringing all the other advanced stuff, and especially before bringing AI into all the technology stack that they have.
Yeah, and you made me think of something, in addition to omni-channel, is presence. So a lot of customers are now using like a Teams application maybe, or they have a contact center provider that doesn't necessarily do the phone system too. You've got to remember that you need some type of presence capability to know, okay, I'm on a Teams call, don't send me a contact center call, right? Making sure that you have that presence and that visibility if you have disparate systems, because not every contact center can do phone system. This is important to consider from a feature perspective.
Well, and then it's also interesting because one of the problems that a lot of omni-channel companies are struggling with is how many channels escalate to a higher channel, right? So how many times do we have a chat now escalate to a live call? Some of our capabilities, along with Service Cloud Voice and the nesting and object relational capabilities that Salesforce provides, allows us to make that linking happen. So we know what % of time a chat is going to escalate based off of case type, based off of customer type, geography, any of those types of things. Because again, as I was mentioning earlier, we're contextualizing all these data points inside of Salesforce directly.
Absolutely. Oscar, I know you've got features that people are asking about. Tell us all about them.
Well, for us, it's on the API side, unlike having an application that's already built with features, bells and whistles, our APIs power from the most simplest use case to the most complex, right? So I would say rather than give you a list of top features, I'll give you the features that they didn't come to us for is what we're able to provide, like what they don't know that they actually need, because we are exposed to so many of these use cases, right? So we're able to provide that level of expertise to suggest, well, okay, well, you came to us for this feature, but did you know that you can also do this? And we can help you, right? Because we have that coverage. We have those APIs. We know that other customers are doing these type of use cases and that it can be applicable to you.
Absolutely. The art of the possible, making sure that you truly understand what is possible, and then we take a crawl, walk, run approach, always making sure that you know what your end goal is, where we're going, but it doesn't always happen on day one. So speaking about things not always happening on day one, what considerations should customers be making when they're going through these evaluation processes, and what questions should they be asking providers in their cycles? I'll start with you, Joe.
Oh, what questions should they be asking the provider? The number one question that we end up circling back to at the end of the conversation is almost always, how do you bill, right? At the end of the day, understanding what departments, how are cross-department charges going to happen, who's going to be using the system, all of those types of things. That gets held off till very late in the process, and then it's always a scramble to try to get it out the door and buttoned up.
Yeah, I think if the partner that you're working with, the provider you're evaluating, if they aren't kind of giving you those aha moments that you didn't really consider, like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that, you don't want that to happen later in the cycle after you had already gone through pricing and proposals and all this stuff, and then, oh, wait, we didn't consider this and it cost this much more money. So I think making sure that provider is really helping you to through that evaluation is really important.
And kind of along those same lines too is when do you need this live by?
Oh.
Right, so
Yeah.
when does your current contract expire? Okay, let's work back from that date so we can figure out when do you need to have decisions made, When do we need to have products stood up? When do we need to have testing done? All of those things. And that's across whatever provider you end up selecting. Understanding what those time horizons are to realistically deliver a project that's successful is mission critical. And a lot of times people get wrapped up into specific features and then they miss their time horizons, and all of a sudden we're up against the wall, everybody's scrambling to try and get a project live.
Yeah, and that's an important question to ask your provider is, what's your process, provider? What is the process that we're going to go through, not only post-sale, but in the sales process? What does the sales process look like? What should I expect? What do I need to be prepared with? And then post-sale, how do I make sure that I'm going to hit whatever my timeline is? You got to ask because every provider is going to be a little different. They're going to have a different answer. So knowing what you need to be prepared with and how the process is going to flow is really important. Karim, what would you have people consider in the sales process?
I mean, just to keep on going on that specific point, I think everyone gets excited when you talk about technology. You know, you see a demo and you get everyone excited. I think it's really thinking about the next steps and also focusing on the services, but also the support. Things can happen, but you have to be, to your point, prepared. You know, if something will happen during the project, post-implementation, post-go live. You know, we've seen customer, we've trained their team, their admin team, and the whole admin team, you know, there is a turnover. What do you do then? So it's really being like prepared in advance and really trying to explain, because you always keep that part for the end, you know, just the week before you sign the contract, which is, I think, that should be starting at the beginning. It's the, you know, whole approach about, you know, okay, I have the right technology, the right partner. How is this partner going to help me to deliver a successful project?
Yeah, I think you need to understand what will be the resource allocation requirements on your side as a customer. Because again, with every provider, some providers will do a lot of white glove. Some providers, while it looks less expensive on the front end, you're gonna do a whole lot more work. So knowing what your responsibility is, the resource allocation you need on your side, and then the costs come into play there, right? That's important to ask the provider, what do I have to do in this process? Oscar, what would you add?
Yeah, so understanding what a successful POC would be. So from the buyer, what are the metrics? What are they hoping to accomplish? Because they may be evaluating you against different providers, right? Different vendors. And so, you know, hopefully they're evaluating against the same metrics. So it's important to communicate that to the vendor, that these are my goals, these are my objectives with this POC, so that at the end of the POC, you understand exactly where you're at, and it'll help you make the decision of whether to go with that vendor or not.
I love that you bring up the POC because it's an important point to make. A lot of customers want to do a POC before you actually purchase a very expensive piece of software or whatever it may be and implement it in your organization is the lifeline of the business. But being prepared to go into that POC and knowing the time on both ends, making sure you know what your success criteria is, your test cases, what are we going to test, how are we going to test it, all of these things are very important to know going into a POC. Katrina, what considerations should customers make as they're evaluating?
I'd say one of the biggest things is finding out what the vendor's customers are saying about them. You know, if you're able to get a hold of testimonials, obviously the Salesforce App Exchange, being able to go out there and read the reviews that customers are giving of that provider is super important, because you want full transparency. So that's another thing as well, is like, are those providers willing to tell you how they stack up from a support perspective? How reliable is their platform? Do they have a trust site? Those are all things that you want to make sure that you look into, you know, so that you're making the best decision with the information that you have at hand. So I think that's super important.
I totally agree. If you're evaluating a Salesforce embedded application, look at the App Exchange. What are people saying about it? Karim, what should be the longest part of the evaluation process?
It shouldn't be legal. I guess. I would say it's often is, but I would say the scoping of the project. So that's the step that happens during the sales process. So being able to put together in a document, sharing not only the list of requirements, but also the task and the ownership. So who is going to do what? Because some customer might have the wrong expectation in terms of, oh, I thought you were going to do it. So really putting not only the task, the expectation, and to Joe's point, like the timeline, like, if you have to hit a deadline, like make sure to be prepared for that. And also to your point, Laura, have the right resource in advance. We see a lot of customers like trying to do everything at the same time. So Salesforce implementation, bringing the contact center, but their Salesforce team is overwhelmed. They are not able to help like install the package, changing, adding custom fields, maybe doing some Salesforce flow. So taking that into account during the scoping session, because you put that on paper and you share that internally and externally is a very critical thing. And also the second aspect is that this scoping document will allow you to share it once you move to the project. Because the people buying versus the people using are usually two different teams, and being able to have this proper handover on paper is a very important thing.
I totally agree. The documentation of the process, it'll save you time too, right? You go through a sales process, you meet with all these salespeople, and they promise you all this stuff, but putting it on paper, getting both people to agree to it, and then when you get to the implementation and the support phase, it's a blueprint. You've got a blueprint for what you went through in this whole sales process. You put all this time in. Let's make sure we're documenting that and moving it forward to the right groups. Speaking of deadlines, though, Joe, when should customers start their evaluations for new technology or new communications tools?
You're going to want at least a year, to be frank. These technology decisions take time to evaluate appropriately and then to get stood up, right? Our average project from start to finish is about 3 months. Once you get resources assigned, everything's approved and all of those things. So depending on the size of the organization, if you have to run through an RFP, if you have to get through legal review, we want to do a robust scoping. Once the project kicks off, our professional services team is going to go through a solution design workshop to work through all of the implementation details, time horizons, responsible parties, do all of those types of things. That stuff takes time. The number one piece of feedback we get from our customers in any of our reviews, especially on the AppExchange, is about the quality of delivery in the implementation phase, and it's because of our approach and our attention to detail that drives successful projects. The product does great by itself, right? But what customers remember was the experience they had installing it as compared to other companies that they've worked with in the past.
I would add that know what your internal process is like and how long these types of procurement decisions take, because if you start too soon, you have to consider your internal use cases that may develop, evolve, or change in the process. Just quite frankly, forgetting things, right? You did a demo months ago and you forgot, oh, this provider did this provider did that. It's a long process, it's a lot of work, and so if you start too soon, it may not be relevant by the time you actually get to buying if your process is 2-3 years, which we have customers that take 2-3 years to make a decision on these things. Let's go down the line, and if you had any other advice that you could share, and then I have one more question after that and we'll open it up. What advice would you share with a customer who's looking at a new communications partner?
I would say make sure that whoever you choose is flexible. So you want to make sure that you have the flexibility. So let's say back to that decision-making process of when is the best time to make the move, is that you may have your own internal projects that are going on and you may want to phase things out. So you're not going to make, put the whole solution together all at once. So you want to be able to work with a carrier or a partner who's able to do those in little chunks if necessary. So we can move as fast or as slow as the customer would like to meet their deadlines, but making sure that you have that capability to where you're not going to get pigeonholed into a certain solution because it doesn't have the flexibility to support multiple platforms. We have customers that are using a lot of our technology partners, and the great thing about Vonage is that we're able to integrate into those systems so that we keep our customers in the systems that they use every single day instead of forcing them just to use our technology. So I think that's really important.
Flexibility, I like it. Oscar, what do you got?
For me, it's just making sure that the vendor has the proper level of expertise and support teams that are going to support you through the buying process, the pre-sales process, but not only that, even into post-sales. I was alluding to earlier that it's one thing to find the solution that you're looking for. And deciding to go with this vendor, but it's another to actually implement it and put it into production. And so making sure that the vendor is going to support you throughout the process and beyond, because like for example on the API side, unlike selling a big application like a contact center or a whole UC system, which you don't want to do often, right? With the API side, there's a sense of flexibility in that you can iterate as you learn certain things that maybe not working. You can make adjustments, and so having a vendor that is going to support you on an interval basis, whether it's every quarter or biannually, that's going to meet with you and determine what needs to be adjusted, what additional products and capabilities are out there on the market that maybe your competitors are using, and that now you could take advantage of.
Absolutely. I think you shouldn't ever be afraid to ask for more resources from your partner. Hey, I want to talk to somebody who leads your customer success team. I want to talk to somebody who leads your support team, and getting engaged and involved with those people before you buy to make sure that they've got flexibility and the capability of bringing those people to the table, and they can share their expertise, and you can really start to ask those hard questions and get answers before you make a decision on who you're going to be working with for the next 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 years. Mm-hmm. Karim, what advice do you have?
I would say, again, really take your time, be prepared. I think that's the most important thing, but get all your teams involved. So I think there was a talk this morning where, the person was talking about involving end users, and I think it's very important. Again, we mentioned that, the people buying versus the people using the product are different, so bringing them together, I think is super important.
Yeah, and this happens. This is really true. The end user doesn't get access till it's implemented, and they ask for something that, we didn't think of that. So getting the end users involved is not a bad idea. I think it's a very good idea. So thank you for sharing that advice. Joe, what advice do you have?
So the biggest piece in all of this is really around experience. And a large portion of that experience is finding a company that you can actually partner with. There's a completely different end experience if you are simply buying a product and using the product. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, okay, you've got contractual obligations. It's completely different when you have a partner that's going to solve difficult problems with you, alongside you, that's on their own growth journey and is soliciting feedback, help with backlog and where is the roadmap going and all of those things. And so for me, a large part of why I joined Vonage is because of the partnerships that are there and the desire to learn and grow together with our customers.
Talking about learning and growing and all of that good stuff, I would say this. Be open to taking the advice of the providers that you're working with. Sometimes you're going to ask for requirements or use cases that they can't accomplish, but they have a better way. And so being in this box of, well, we need it this way because it's always been this way. Be willing to maybe think about reinventing or innovating the way that you do things, because there may be a better way out there. And so take the advice of the providers. Every provider out there has a value proposition. They have a strength or some type of advantage over the other providers. And so hearing what they would say is their strengths or their advantages and why you should do business with them is an important question, so that you can understand how they're evolving and how they're gonna help you to grow moving forward. So this is my last question. Who do I want to start with? I feel like I want to start with you, Oscar. If you had a crystal ball, where is communications headed?
Well, I think, when was it? Yesterday, we covered a little bit on digital humans. There was a panel up here that was covering digital humans. I think it's going to be more interactivity with AI, right? We've been hearing a lot about this whole metaverse, with Facebook being a big proponent of that. Facebook is still largely used, and we at Vonage, I mentioned innovation. That's something that we're also getting into, right? Being able to provide our products with an AI component, right? With the end goal to help facilitate communications, whether it's two people needing to communicate that don't speak the same language, so having a translator involved, and that translator being powered by an AI bot with a digital human, being able to transact within the metaverse, using some of our capabilities. So I think it's going to be all AI, digital humans, metaverse. I think it's going to be interesting. So.
Yeah, I think people think of AI and it's like this future thing. It's like, it's here.
Yeah.
It's here and it's happening. The future is now. And the metaverse isn't that far off either. I mean, I saw a friend of mine, she was at a conference in the metaverse. She was at a real estate conference in the metaverse. It's happening, it's here. It's really awesome and insane, and I'm glad that we get to be a part of it. Katrina?
One of the things I will say is, we're moving away from circuits. We're moving away from the old school technology as far as voice is concerned. A lot of the carriers are pulling the plug on their PRI connections and their, fax lines and all this other stuff. So where does that move us to? And I see that we're going to start utilizing more and more of the 5G and 6G capabilities that Ericsson, our parent company, is now working on. And I also see a transition from everyone using their desktop application on their computer to doing things, and they're going to start moving that to more of a mobile use case. We see more and more mobile requirements from our customers. So I think that's something that Vonage, together with Ericsson, we can really help fill that void for our customers utilizing 5G and 6G technology as well.
This is totally true. I mean, we used to work with customers all the time, and we have an SD-WAN solution, and people were in office, they wanted SD-WAN because it would help improve the quality and the uptime within their office. But no one's in the office anymore. So what are we going to do now? Well, I think 5G and 6G is happening. It's happening now again. Anything, Karim, you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, coming back on the AI topic, there is a lot of excitement, a lot of technology here. I mean, when you talk about AI, conversation AI with voicebot and chatbot, but also agent assist with real-time transcription and next best action is fairly well adopted, and also RPA, which is robotic automations. I think for me, the very exciting stuff will happen around data, being able to have an AI that will proactively push you the right thing to do, but also that will be, I would say, system agnostic. Everyone has its AI tool. How do you bring that all together to make the right decision for the business? So I think that's one thing. The second thing, more focused on the contact center side, is like more predictive routing. So I see a lot of customers having to build hundreds of call flows. What about having predictive AI that will basically learn from all the system, the database, the CRM, especially around Salesforce, and make the decision to send the call, the SMS, the chat to the right person without having to build a static or dynamic flow. I think that's really the future of the contact center. I mean, the way I see it, yeah.
Absolutely. Data is very important and powerful, and we've got so much data out there. How do you understand that data and then use that data to make better business decisions? I think we have a lot of opportunity area there. Joe?
Well, and it's interesting because it starts to push the bounds from reactive communications to predictive communications, proactive communications, right? So if we can predict an outage is coming, or we can understand how an outage is going to impact a specific user group, doing proactive outreach improves that overall experience for those customers and really drives that engagement and user model. And it's all experience-based. So again, leveraging AI, leveraging the data, moving to communications in any platform across any device, regardless of where you're located, that's where all of this drives towards.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for sharing all of this very valuable information. I always love learning from you all. Any questions? Do we have any questions? Well, again, I hope you found value in this session today. These folks are here for the next couple of days, and we're all in there showing demos and doing some really cool stuff. The future is now. There is really cool technology to be shown. So please stop by, say hi, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.